which is of huge concern to governments and therefore a huge pressure point for the industry, is what is the risk of these technologies of non-state sponsored currencies to capital markets, to the ability of governments to enact monetary policy. So we want to make sure that we also have a very clear public record and fact-based research on what the real impact of these technologies are, rather than the narratives and myths and noise around what these technologies might do. So one of the other things that we work on are fungibility studies. You know, there's a lot of talk around tagging coins and trying to trace the origin of those coins and creating tainted coins. We want to, make sure that we really fully assess with all of these experts involved what the real fungibility issues are around the technologies, and also scalability and economic consensus.
And then we have a working group which is completely focused on the question of intellectual property and how the blockchain can complement or can supplement the intellectual property regime. So we have run a few pilots, for instance, with Creative Commons France, in order to design how we can actually use the blockchain as a registry. So no longer using the blockchain as a payment system, but to actually encode information in a trusted manner, so that anyone can actually ascertain at every moment in time the authenticity of the licensing, and can make sure that any work that they encounter, they can always check and verify whether it has actually been licensed by the copyright holder and under which condition. We also are working on the question of digital certificate. So most importantly, for instance, in the case of public domain works, so how we can actually use the blockchain to enable galleries and museums and public sector institutions to actually certify the legal status of a work, and to actually sign this certification on the blockchain as a proof, so that over time, as more certifications are issued for the same work, then the likelihood that this work is indeed in the public domain increase. We also are working together with IPFS in order to provide decentralized archival of content in a way that is relying on a peer-to-peer network, so that we don't encounter the traditional problem of like the scalability of having one centralized archive, but that everyone that is contributing to the network is also hosting content on the behalf of the authors. And then we're also coming up with or designing alternative business models. So instead of relying on the traditional exclusivity of copyright law, we're trying to explore how we can use the blockchain not just as it is perhaps the most obvious use in order to create some kind of digital health management system based business model, but on the contrary, in order to actually promote the dissemination and actually encourage the creation of derivative works, but in a way that every single time a work is being rewarded, then this reward is being dispatched to everyone that has contributed to the work from which the work was derived. So the idea is to really come up with new models that are that go beyond, in fact, like Creative Commons was one model of relying on copyright, but still using the copyright system in order to remunerate the author. Whereas with the blockchain, we actually, we think, and we are trying to identify how to design the system in order to enable rewards without having to rely on the exclusivity of copyright law. Identity and privacy.
So as part of these working groups, we are actually not only doing pilot projects, but also doing impact assessments and reports. So the Identity and Privacy Working Group has been working on a white paper that covers the cross-jurisdictional impact of AML, CTF policies around the world. Also trying to, one of the concerns around the technology is that it's pseudo-anonymous and therefore difficult to have oversight and to maintain to track illicit funds or terrorist financing. So one of the proposals that have come out, for example, is to create a blockchain-based identity system or AML system. Now, there may be some advantages to this, but there are also huge privacy issues. So we want to make sure that as we look at national security issues and as we attempt to use these technologies to enable proper oversight, we're not misunderstanding the way the technology works and having unintended consequences. You know, the fact that blockchains provide a very transparent layer and also represents an immutable record means that that there are going to be privacy issues. If you put identity to that record, you're going to have a record for all time that anyone can see. So we need to be very thoughtful around any proposals around tracking these transactions online, and we're working on a white paper to make sure that there's proper impact assessment. Another of our working groups is a security and governance working group. So one of the things we're exploring is the role of multi-signature technologies to promote proper governance and security. So we have best practice guidelines for people who are offering these kinds of products. We're also trying to identify for policymakers and regulators where something like a multi-signature wallet really helps them in their policy goals, really reduces the risk to consumers, creates more efficient ways of interacting and payments, and also where these technologies like smart contracts can be applied to create better internal governance procedures. So where these transparent ledgers can be used to have better oversight of organizations, where these ledgers or smart contracts can be used to increase data security and integrity within organizations.
And then there is the question of cryptographic tokens. So we're trying to understand from a legal perspective what is the actual legal status of the different use that we can do of a cryptographic token. This is extremely important because, in fact, most of the blockchain-based applications today, they rely on this concept of there being a token that represent a different kind of use value. And the problem is that at the moment, there is a really huge uncertainty as to how we can interpret those tokens in the current regulatory framework. Most notably, the most obvious assimilation, well, in the case of Bitcoin, is obviously it can be a commodity, it can be money, or it can be a security. And this is actually quite problematic in the context of like the new blockchain-based applications, which are actually not financial at all, and which are just using those tokens in order to actually use the service that is provided. The problem is that if we consider those tokens to be actual securities, then this means that those new initiatives, those startups that are emerging all the time, they will have to actually bear an extremely high cost in terms of formalities in order to actually abide to the securities laws. And so we're trying to understand how we can actually frame, how we can package those services and how we can contractually design some kind of system in order for the regulatory framework to actually understand and to interpret those tokens in a different way according to what is the actual use case that we're taking. So we have this report that is, it has started actually since the first blockchain workshop at Harvard, and we had a lot of lawyers and entrepreneurs working together and trying to devise all the possible way in which we can justify considering the crypto token in one way or another. So the report should be actually released quite shortly. Then we have the issue of smart contracts, which is another really hot topic in the legal field, in the sense that there's a lot of debate as to whether a smart contract is a legally valid contract, whether it is actually enforceable, etc. With the basic understanding that, in fact, a smart contract is nothing else but a script running on a decentralized database. It is obviously difficult to consider it to be an enforceable contract. However, it does actually have properties, at least at the technical level, which can make it quite akin to being a legal contract. So what we're working on here, and this is again, this is an ongoing process of many months, almost 1 year, is how do we actually create some kind of glue between the technical blockchain world, in which those smart contracts are actually self-enforcing, and therefore there needs to be no legal, the legal meaning of the smart contract doesn't matter as long as we remain into the blockchain world. However, more and more blockchain applications are used in order to interface with things that exist in the real world, and at this point a smart contract actually needs to acquire also a legal validity, and it needs to be enforceable in a real court. So we're working on designing those templates of contracts that can be linked together from the smart contract to a legal contract, so that whenever we transact on the blockchain, we're also entering into an enforceable legal contract in the real world. So Internet of Things, same thing. There is more and more the blockchain is being used in order to incorporate into technical devices, into everyday objects, and in order to allow for those objects to communicate with each other, but also to transact directly with each other. So the question then becomes, on the one hand, how we can actually ensure secure communication between those objects, but also it raises a lot of problems in terms of the smart property, the concept of we have the legal concept of property, which is assigned by the legal system and which also can be regulated through the legal system. When we enter into the concept of a smart property, or these cryptographically activated assets, which means that the blockchain is actually dictating what people can or cannot do with a particular device that they are interacting with, then we kind of enter back into the same discourse as we had perhaps 10 or 15 years ago with the concept of digital right management system, that were actually dictating the condition by which we can access content and exploit content. And in this case, it becomes much more important, much more crucial to actually come up with a proper legal solution with this issue, because it is not just content or online communication, but it is actually interacting with everyday devices which actually have a tangible effect on our life.
So we also have a working group on DAOs, which is smart contracts magnified to 1,000. So these are really sophisticated smart contracts that could potentially create an entire organizational structure in which you have both members and then crypto equity that pools those, that coordinates resources and decision making within those members. So this has the ability, the potential, if it works, to allow us to benefit from pooled resources and decision making without the traditional drawbacks of having a central authority, a corporation, a board you need a trust to do the right thing. So, obviously these are extremely novel. We're still exploring, what these organizations will look like, what they can do. One of the things our working group in our white paper looks at is whether, what is the legal wrapping around a distributed autonomous organization? What does that membership structure look like in terms of the legal framework? And this goes back to the work that we're doing in smart contracts to figure out what is the legal wrapping around the smart contracts as well. So, one of the things that our paper will explore is not only that the legal side of things, but also how, different social organizations and market players can coordinate around these autonomous organizations that are powered by smart contracts on blockchain.
And of course, we are also working on the concept of non-autonomous distributed organization in the sense of how can blockchain technology be used in order to help people to coordinate each other. So autonomous organization is kind of the first step, which is we just use the smart contract in order to do automated things. But more and more, the blockchain actually provide tools for actual social organization to interact in a way without the traditional hierarchical structure, in a much more decentralized way, and in a way that is transparent and much more accountable. So the blockchain can be used in terms of organization. It can be used on the one hand to just codify the procedural rule of an organization into a distributed autonomous organization, but also in order to create new governance structure on which normal organization can deploy themselves.
So we've really moved fast in this year. We've, with the Sydney workshop in December, that'll be 5 last year. Next year, we have at least 2 planned, one in New York and another in Brazil, we hope. And we also have a number of pilot projects going. So Primavera mentioned the pilot with Creative Commons and using blockchain-based IP registry and attribution. Another is a prototype of a reputation system, which Primavera has been working on. And also the DAO legal framework, creating a legal structure in which these decentralized autonomous organizations or non-autonomous decentralized organizations powered by blockchain can work within the current legal structures. Another is exploring different protocols and consensus mechanisms that may present improvements over the blockchain protocol or others that are emerging. And so we're also working, one of our projects is to do formal verification of these protocols to make sure they're fully tested before being deployed out in the real world. They did the wrong. They did the wrong deck.
Anyway, so we do have a lot of partnership. Yeah, it's a wrong deck. Anyway, so we are partnering with several academic institutions. We have of course Harvard, MIT, which have been with us since the beginning. We have had the workshop organized together with Stanford, together with the University of Oxford, Cambridge, UCL. Now we're working together with the University of Science and Technology of Sydney, and the following workshop will be probably organized at the European University Institute, etc. So we are building a network of academics and of academic institutions that are slowly becoming more and more interested in this issue. And the idea is really we want to create a global network of not just academic, but really just everyone, every kind of institution that is interested in exploring those questions and collaborating together with us. Because of course we know that no single person can actually address those issues. We do need, just with the internet governance, we do need a complete global and multi-stakeholder approach. So we're in touch with a lot of engineers that are actually working on the technology and so on. We're in touch with a lot of lawyers that are interested in exploring and identifying legal solutions to those emerging technologies, with researchers and academics, and entrepreneurs, of course, because those are actually the person that are leading and that are pioneering in this field. So, of course, we're looking for more partnerships. So if anyone is interested either to join the Dynamic Coalition, just come and talk to us. And if your institution would actually like to be involved, and in any way we can figure out how we can actually create a partnership together. So this is the first year, but this was an actually extremely productive year, and we expect that it's just gonna go even more fast as we go. So it will like we need more and more people, we need more help, and we need it to become a real global initiative. So I think I would suggest that we can go with the questions. Perhaps we should do them outside. It's just really noisy here. No? We can meet in the. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is a dynamic coalition on blockchain technology.
Yes.
How is it dynamic?
Well, we moved quite fast in the last year.
What do you mean with this question?
It's just that when dynamic coalitions are convened, kind of like this technology that you're talking about is a very new technology that I don't understand why you want to use the concept of multi-stakeholder governance when discussing this. I think it's just too early, and you might want to talk to more people before actually convening the dynamic coalition.
Well, actually, I will argue the opposite. I think because it is so early, and because this technology is most likely going to have a really important impact, it is actually really important that we start talking as soon as possible, and that we actually talk with as many actors as possible, because no one single actor has the right answer, and it's only through discussion and debates that we can actually identify what is the best roadmap.
We didn't plan last year to hold 5 blockchain workshops this year. It's been an insane amount of work, but what happened was an organic group grew around these technologies. We had people with each conversation that we took from each city we had more and more people from a variety of disciplines. I mean, the diversity of people involved in the technologies is extremely vast, and it's because these technologies touch on so many different areas. So it's been quite dynamic, it's been quite interactive. This has been very organic, and that's the reason why we're here today, now at a point where we can really take this, a little bit further.
Oh, okay. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. George Sadowski, ICANN. The word dynamic has an interesting history. I was part of the MAG in the first year of the IGF, and somebody said, let's have coalitions around various subjects. That was decided, and then somebody else said, why don't we introduce the word dynamic? It sounds better. And Nitin Desai, who was the head, said, that's a good idea. And that was, so that's why they're called dynamic coalitions. In this case, I think it's appropriate, but it is a marketing term more than a descriptive term.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just comment on that? So at the moment that it has evolved for the past, I think, 9 years, and the dynamic coalitions have been very active in coming up with principles, and a lot of stakeholder groups talk about principles, values, mechanisms, and all these things. And at the moment, I'm a little bit concerned that you're going too fast to have conversations over various things with people that don't understand what sort of technology you're talking about. Anyway, that's just a comment, but I wish you luck, and I would like to collaborate with you.
So one of our, we actually showed the wrong presentation, so there are a few slides missing, but one of the things that we do is really try to educate, because there are a lot of people who would care about these technologies, but it's very complex, it's really inaccessible. So why we hold these workshops is to invite people who don't know about the technologies to learn, from a variety of different stakeholders on, what they've been working on in a little piece. So definitely, raising that common floor of education and getting more stakeholders involved is a key part of what we're doing.
Thank you. If you have any more questions, if you want to actually discuss on a more personal basis, we will just be outside on the grass. Please come and join us.